Hi, everyone, and welcome to a More Than Words podcast and interview. My name is Alison Kelly, and I'm your host. Today, we have our special guest, Karl Sandland. I love that name, Sandland, Karl Sandland. Karl, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about you and why you're here?
I would, and I like that name too, Alison. And thank you for having me. Really looking forward to this podcast interview. So yeah, really thanks for having me. So I am Karl Sandland, the name that I like, the name that you like. I am a confidence and self-belief coach. So my background is not always been coaching. So I have worked my way up through the ranks over the last sort of 25 years through customer service.
Wow.
into senior manager roles, director roles, and even was lucky enough to sit on the board of directors of a software company as chief customer officer. And it was during that time that things just didn't quite feel right in what I was doing in my career. And I didn't quite know at that stage what it was. But through some self-discovery and working with a coach, realized that I just wasn't following my beliefs, values, did some volunteer mentoring, and then moved into coaching. And now I help and coach customer-focused leaders to basically be the best version of themselves, to overcome anything that they need to overcome in their career or life, which is an exciting roller coaster to be on.
Wow, that's so wonderful. So amazing. Now, you're saying about overcoming things in your life. Now, today, the reason that we're on here is because we're trying to raise awareness about domestic violence, and especially in men, because it's still a taboo kind of subject, isn't it? And going back, we've spoken and you've told me and been really honest about your journey. So can I just ask you some questions around the domestic violence?
Absolutely.
Okay? Yeah. Thank you. So first of all, can you share with us your personal experience about domestic abuse and really how it affected your life?
I can, and it means turning back time a little bit, but not too far. So I suppose it goes back to year 2000. So I met what I thought was a lovely lady at that time. And things progressed, and by the end of the relationship, we were married, we'd got a child, and we'd been together 7 years. But things just didn't seem right a few months in. There was just, again, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. There were quite severe mood swings. She'd attempted suicide herself a number of times. She had a history of mental health disorders, some diagnosed, some that I suspect now, knowing a lot more about mental health, that were probably undiagnosed or not treated properly, such as bipolar. And quite quickly, some odd behavior set in. Again, looking back now and knowing a lot more about domestic violence now, and knowing that it's psychological, it can be psychological, sexual, financial, emotional. It doesn't just have to be physical. Knowing now, I was actually abused from pretty much a few months in. Towards the end, it got very, very bad. I guess I'd got into the situation again because of the taboo. I'm quite a big guy. I look like quite a rough, nasty guy. I used to work on the doors as a bouncer for 10 years. I've done all sorts of martial arts. I'm a typical sort of guy that you wouldn't expect that there's abuse going on, and you certainly wouldn't expect that if quite a short, small woman is hitting you, trying to stab you or hit you with things, you would have thought that, well, somebody my size with my skills could overcome that. But I guess what a lot of people don't realize is because of the psychological conditioning and because of what goes on with the coercive behavior, the controlling behavior, you almost sort of lose yourself. You don't know who you are anymore. So sorry, I'm going on a little bit, but I got to the stage probably a couple of years in where, I didn't, although I was the sole earner and on quite a reasonable salary, I didn't have my own access to my own bank account. I would have to ask for money. And yet all the bills came out of my account. There were very often loans that had to be applied for to give us extra money that were in my name, but it was for something that she wanted. There was all sorts of controlling behavior about the jobs. You know, it was at certain roles I wouldn't say quite public facing, but I was dealing with a lot of people, you know, in big offices, and I would be questioned which women I'd spoken to, what were their names, how old were they, what did they look like, and so on and so on. You know, you'd have that barrage of questioning when you got in, and none of that really seems too bad. But when you add to that the fact that, and then if the wrong answer was given, hit with something or attacked in some way or strangled, you know, add to all of that together, to do with all that conditioning over the years and years and years, and you can imagine it starts to break you down. And one of the other typical symptoms, which again I now know of somebody who is abusing somebody else in that sort of situation, I slowly sort of lost touch with all my friends. Yeah. So my friends dwindled, and then there were fallouts with my family. And there were fallouts with her family and other people, shared friends, apart from ones that she really trusted and had known her for a long time. And it seemed very much then that I'm just, this is now my life. I've been dealt these cards. I know it's not right, but, you know, I'm talking now sort of 5 or 6 years in. And you just sort of put up with it. You know the patterns, you know what's going to trigger her to become abusive in whatever way. So half the time you just want to get it over and done with. It's like, have you done this? Yeah, bang, right, okay, can we move past that now? Because I know after the aggression there's going to be a cycle of calm, and hopefully that cycle of calm is going to last for a while. You know, especially if there's money involved and we can go out and we can spend money on this, then hopefully you're going to be happy for a while. But eventually it got to that stage where the cycles of calm didn't really take place anymore. Yeah. It was just hostile all the time. But so I left in 2007. I walked away from it. I don't really know where that came from, because by then I was broken. I had no job. I had no family. I had no control of my own money.
Sounds like you were actually conditioned by them.
Yeah, I was just I don't know what I was. I'd say a robot, but even robots seem to have a purpose. I seem to have no purpose. I was just there surviving, I suppose. Walked away from it. And that you would think would be it, but far from it. That's really where it got very tough. Yeah. Not because I had nowhere to go, because by then I'd started. I was still working on the doors as a bouncer. There were a couple of people that I'd started to become more friendly with, even though my wife would turn up and park outside the pub I worked on to keep an eye on me for the 2 hours I was there, which again is like wacky behavior. But the problem then was, I was working on one of the doors one night, and this is after I'd left, and all of a sudden the police came to arrest me. So it's like, okay, what's all of this about then? And anyway, as the story goes on, what she'd actually then done was completely flipped what had been going on for the past 7 years, and I was then being under suspicion, investigated for domestic abuse against her for the last 7 years, which again, as I know,
very common. That is quite very common. Yeah.
And the detail of particular events that had happened and who was involved and who'd seen this and all the proof that she had, it's like, where has all this come? I mean, this is just not true. I mean, I can even remember in one of the early interviews smiling. It was almost like a nervous, what are you talking about? This is, and the police officer picking me up on it and saying, this isn't funny, Mr. Sandland. And I'm thinking, no, I know it's not funny, but I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. So that went on. Sorry, I'm going on now. That went on for probably a good 7 or 8 months, being arrested, bailed, more investigations, arrested, bailed, accused of breaching bail because I actually wasn't allowed to go near my home or approach her, but then she would actually make sure she shopped in the same place as me, or actually came in contact with me and then report me for being in contact with her. So I'm arrested for breach of bail and stuff. Fortunately, it all went away. The CPS just decided at some point they had no case. The funny thing was, she started to complain about the police officers who were dealing with the case, saying that they weren't taking it seriously.
Right.
You know, they were. So I wonder then if that's, you know what I mean? That's what actually made them think, now there's something not right here. Plus,
so it sounded like it was financial, physical, emotional, mental, every kind of abuse going there.
Pretty well, apart from the sexual, but yeah,
sexual.
pretty much every part apart from the sexual. It was interesting. But then it's like I say, I think the thing that was the big thing that a lot of people don't realize is it's not just breaking away. Breaking away isn't when you go.
No.
It's the ramifications of that afterwards. It's when when your abuser's lost control, it's what they will then do to try and gain some control back afterwards.
It's a rebuilding, isn't it, as well? Because you've got to rebuild you, because the person that you thought that you were in love with was actually, you know, it's not the person that, you know, when you married her, it wasn't the person that you went with, wasn't the abusive person that was in front of you, you know, who she had become. So now you're, who am I? Because you knew who you were when you met. Now you've got to discover you again, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you've got to discover you and I guess wrestle with the fact that, my God, my judgment is terrible. I'm, you know, you're already demoralized because of what's happened, but then you're also questioning everything about what you think about life, people, situations, who you can trust. I mean, yeah, it's you've got to do a lot of soul searching, and you've got to do it quite quickly, I think, in order to repair. For me, the saving grace for me was I met my current wife very quickly. In fact, I was talking to, she was one of the friends that I had during the latter stages. And although we weren't together then, we are now together, have been for like 15 years. And, you know, it's all good. But I don't know why, but she was just there for me. She just supported literally everything that was going on, and just implicitly trusted me straight away. I mean, a lot of women would not get involved with somebody who'd been accused of domestic violence against the previous partner and was, you know what I mean, was being constantly arrested for it. And yet she just trusted, she just knew. So it's through that I suppose she helped me regain that confidence and trust in at least one person. And to find myself again, and again to be in that refreshing, to be in that situation where I don't have to, you're not questioning, don't you want to know who I'm working with? Don't you want to know which women I've spoken to? It's like, it was really weird to be in that situation, but good. Yeah,
but good. So I'm glad that it's that you found someone that you're able to talk to, because it's so important to have. I mean, I'm just going to tell the listeners what's going on. So I've got a list of questions here, and I don't think we're even looking at we haven't even looked at the questions because, you know, it's fine. It's absolutely, this is what I want. I want our listeners to know the real raw situations, because this is life. This is what we're actually dealing with, you know, and what you're actually describing there. There's so many people out there that might be listening now and thinking, that's how I am. That's the situation I'm in. And, you know, and hearing your story is hopefully going to give somebody hope, you know, and that's why you can talk and talk and talk, Karl, because, you know, to hear that, I just think I applaud you. I've been there. You know, you said that you watched my video the other day and you heard my story. So when you said, you know, about you leave that situation, you're in a relationship, and it's like, I was pushing my partner. I was lucky enough to find someone, and I was pushing the buttons thinking, surely they're going to change now. They're going to turn into how I've been treated before. But, you know, luckily there is good people out there. So I am going to go to one of my questions. I am.
Go on.
Why do you think that there's still taboo around men speaking on about the experiences of abuse? Why do you think it is harder for men to talk about it than women?
I think it's just been historic social norms, I think, really, hasn't it? I mean, the thing that stopped me was, well, you're a wimp. You know, you're a wimp. You're a lot bigger. You're a lot stronger than a woman. You can't let that happen to you. You know, what are you talking about? And there's also, I think, an element of fear, especially people know how things can flip and transverse very quickly. Like it did with me, where the abused all of a sudden became the accused abuser. I think a lot of that can happen as well. But I think a lot of it as well is the lack of knowledge and the education out there about, first of all, what domestic abuse is, because a lot of people think it's just partners, it's the person you're with. It's not. Domestic abuse is about families, significant others, people you live with, civil partners of, different sex marriages, same-sex marriages. It is this, although I've been a woman on male victim of domestic abuse, I mean, domestic abuse is not gendered in any way. It's not biased or gendered. Anybody can go through it. And I think when it comes to men have got this thing in their mind where I've got to be the strong one here. I've got to hold things inside. People don't show themselves as being vulnerable a lot of times, unless they've had coaching or are quite in touch with their self-worth. It's almost like men have a lower self-worth and something to prove. And because of that, I mean, they're a lot less likely then to reach out. But then the other side to it as well is, as part of the coercive and controlling behavior, the likelihood is that the abused will be cut off from all of their support network anyway.
Exactly. And you did say that, didn't you? You said that, the friends and everything, and it was just a few of her friends that she trusted, or your friends and family. That's how the abuse starts. It's, for me, it was, why are you wearing makeup? Why are you wearing those clothes? Why do you need to go out? You don't need to go out. You're here. I love you. And you think the way they word it, and it is, they get into your mind, and once that gets in and you start questioning, even though there's a little niggly thing, you kind of like go over that because of love and because you do self-doubt. So being a victim, it's not just what's happening to you, it's everything it goes around it, isn't it? It's what's happening to your friends. Because for me, I got warned. My friends were giving me little warning. Are you sure that you can't come out? Is that the way it should be? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. He just loves me. It's just showing that he cares. So you get all these signals, you get all these friends, and before you know it, you're just there with the abuser and you're a victim, and you are thinking in your mind so much. So when you get out of it, you're still almost a victim, even though you're a survivor. I don't know about you, Karl, if you agree with this or not, but you're still a victim because you've still got things that even years later, something might get said, or a smell or a scene on a movie, and it takes you straight back to that situation. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're conditioned, aren't you? You are in that way. I mean, God, it was probably a couple of years into the relationship with my lovely new wife, Lorna, where I would avoid arguments, and if we did argue, I would flinch, because I was expecting to get hit, and that then in itself, I mean, that was conditioning. There was no way she'd ever raise a hand to me, and she never had, and I had no reason to believe that. It was clearly conditioning, and even more recently, I mean, I thought that I'd pretty much put the past behind me. And I have. There's a lot. Well, there's more to the story as well, but we haven't got the time to go into all of that. I mean, there's a daughter I don't see. I've got a 22-year-old daughter who I haven't seen since the age of 8, because the other thing that she also did was alienate me as well and turn me into a monster, so my daughter wouldn't see me, and there was all sorts that went on. But yeah, in recent years, there was recent stories about Alex Skeel, I think it was, in 2018. So he was, I think it was, like these 24 hours in custody program.
He was from Luton.
Yeah, he followed his story, and then he was also on, Good Morning TV after that as well. And I was looking at that thinking, my God, he really was severe, but he'd got to that same point of despair where it's like, well, this is what it is. I'm not doing anything about this now. I'm just, this is me. This is my life. I'll just get on with it. And even again with the whole and I know there's mixed views on this Depp Amber Heard case. You know, a lot of people were watching that, and personally, that was probably the biggest reminder for me recently, because I was watching him on the stand, and the fact that he didn't want to look at, and I know he's an actor, and people will say, well, he's an actor, they're both actors. But for me, I could see, and I would put my life on it, that he was the person who was abused. And she'd orchestrated a lot of this, and she'd done to him exactly what I'd had done to me with this whole, all of a sudden he's the villain and he's done this. The way his mannerisms, the way, again, in court, people were, you know, picked up on the fact that he grinned or shook his head a couple of times. It's like, you know, when she's saying stuff, it's like, what are you on about? And yet you don't, when you're consciously thinking, I can't look to be guilty, you wouldn't do that. But when it's subconscious and it's happening because you're just amazed at this ridiculous story that's going on. But yeah, so there were those two things that have come up recently that sort of like made me think, my God. And around that time, well, we'll get on to that in a minute, but I found a book, which I'm going to have to mention shortly because it's an amazing book.
That's fine.
And I think it will help a lot of people.
Okay. Yeah, you were saying because you could pick up on the body language in the court. You could see the signals and everything. It's you know, sometimes I find myself people watching. I love people watching, and I can see a couple, and just by their body language, and there's something that he'll do or she'll do, you know, she would do, and you think, oh, you know, you can imagine that when they get home, this isn't going to finish just there, just at that table, that argument. And you have to stop yourself, because, you know, I know myself, if someone had stepped in the situation that I was in, it would have made it a lot worse. If someone has, you know, someone had said, oh, don't do that to Alison, or what are you doing to this lady? That situation, when I got home, although they were trying to help, it would have made things a lot worse. So it's quite, see, this is the thing about abuse, you know, mental abuse, sexual, every kind of abuse you can think of. It's knowing that people want to help you, and you knowing that there's organizations out there that you can go to, but that fear, it's the fear that stops you from moving forward, from escaping, you know, and it's trying to find that inner strength and that determination and that willpower, and to fight your fear to make this, you know, the escape, to make that move. You know, like we have both done that, and look at us both, you know, we're both now helping other people, you know, through situations. And by you having that experience and me having that experience, we're able to empathize with someone who's actually going through it, you know, or have gone through it. So how do we educate the young people about healthy relationships? You know, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of organizations and that, but do you think there's enough out there educating people at the moment?
I don't think there is. No, I really don't think there is. I mean, bearing in mind that I only found a book I'm going to mention in a minute a couple of years ago, you know, and yet this happened, you know, 20 years ago. Well, 20 to 15 years ago. So no, there isn't. There's not enough about it. It's still, domestic violence on the whole is very misunderstood. I think the new act that's been released in 2021, you know, where it specifically defines domestic abuse is between these types of people. It's not just your wife, your husband, your partner. It can be children, cousins, anybody you live with as a family unit, and all of that sort of stuff. I think that's very important. And I think also specifying that it's not just physical, the fact that it can be the coercive, it can be control, and also giving examples of particular behaviors. I think that's really helpful. But it's going to take a while for that to filter through, I guess, the generations and the new generations coming in to understand that. I think more needs to be done to get that as part of a curriculum in schools. They're already doing a lot more on going deeper into sort of sexual education and what is normality in a sexual relationship now, which has moved on significantly more since you and I were at school, I'm sure. But they need to do the same, I think, with with behavioral type relationships in general. And they need to, again, it's not gendered, and yet you say domestic abuse to somebody and straight away they're going to say, oh, that's a man hitting a woman. And I would have done. That was part of why I suppose at the start I excused it, because it didn't exist. It wasn't a thing when I was going through it. It's like I'm trying to register towards this thing that doesn't exist. So it must be in my mind. So I think there's definitely more that they can do. How they would do that, I genuinely don't know. I mean, there's some great self-help books out there. There's some great organizations.
Tell me about this book, Karl, because I know you're dying to tell me. Come on.
This book is amazing. It's called Break the Silence. Now I know I've said that domestic abuse is not gendered. Absolutely, it is not gendered. However, I don't think there is enough out there yet to break the taboo of woman on man domestic abuse. So this book gears in around that, and it's Break the Silence, and it's a support guide for male victims of domestic abuse. It's written by an author called Lee Marks, who himself had been in a woman on man abusive relationship, and also a lot of background in mental health, working in mental health, social care, social work, and works with survivors of domestic abuse, male and female. So a lot of oomph behind this book and a lot of understanding. And what it does is it almost looks like a reference book. It tells a bit of a story, but it then lists out all the different types of behavior and tells a few stories about particular people that he's dealt with, and explains these different types of behavior, but in real terms, what that actually means and looks like. And it tells the story from really early on. It almost goes back to signs to look out for when you're first in a relationship before you even think there's anything wrong. Like, are they constantly asking to look at your phone? Are they asking you where you're going all the time? Are they getting you to check in when you get there? Oh, just give me a text when you get there. Give me a text when you're leaving. And these things seem so normal, and they are normal unless they're stacked up with other things like, oh, and when you get in, and who did you speak to? And the thing for me was, I mean, I knew that I had been a victim of domestic abuse because, I used to have to hide the black eyes, working on the doors. I would say it happened at kickboxing because I kickboxed as well. When I went kickboxing with a black eye, I would say it happened on the doors. I would have this excuse, this three-way excuse. But so I knew I'd been abused, but what I didn't know is that the abuse had started so early. And this takes you through every single sign, the thing to watch out for, the sorts of things that people do, how it starts off, how it gets worse. It explains this pattern of behavior that I said about, the calm, and then there's the trigger and it happens again, and how it shortens. And I just find myself reading this book almost like a checklist and going, and she did that, and she did that, and she did that. Sort of got to the end of it and thought, my God, there must be so many people who go through almost like the first few pages, the first few bits, not knowing that they're in a relationship where they're being abused. And that for me was like, Jesus, this sort of book, this sort of knowledge needs to be out there a lot more, because there are people, I can say now, there are people, men and women, who are in abusive relationships and they don't even register yet that they are abusive relationships, and they will get worse. It will get worse and worse and worse until something serious happens. But they don't even realize. And if I'd have known at the start, it would have been so much easier to break away. And I think that's the key thing, really. So this book is really, as it says, it's a support guide. And it's a support guide not only for people who are being abused, but it would be great if this was available for families and friends and anybody. If anybody read this and was able to understand the symptoms and the signs, it would be a lot easier to stop people cutting them off from their support network, because their friends would be saying, well, are you sure you should be doing that? A bit like you said earlier.
Definitely.
But anyway, sorry, I'll stop going on about the book now.
No, it's fine. Right, Karl, it's been absolutely lovely having you on as a guest. It's been really informative. I've learned something today. What we'll do is at the end, we'll put a link where we can find you, we can find you, listeners, if they want to get in contact with you and maybe discuss anything. Also, maybe a link about the book, if they want to find that book. I think I'd like to read that. I'd like to say thank you for being my guest. It's been really, really lovely talking to you. And do you know what? Like I said, it's it's opened up the Pandora's box, but I'm proud of where I've come from and where I am now. And I'm sure you should be proud of where you are now. So well done.
Thank you. And yeah, absolutely. We're great, and we're better for it. It happened for us, not to us. Look what we're doing now. That's the thing, isn't it?
That's it. We're helping people. We're going to help the world, Karl. We're going to take on the world.
We are indeed. And look, it's been an absolute pleasure. And sorry for going on so much at certain stages.
No, we might have to do another one. I think we'll have to do another interview because I want to hear more. I definitely want to hear part 2. Tune in for part 2 next week.
There is loads. But no, it's been fantastic. And thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Karl. You take care and we'll speak again soon. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Oh.